Welcome to First in the Family, where we explore the world of breaking generational patterns and chains due to access, education, will, or sheer bravery. We celebrate the ways that these accomplishments bring about joy. We honor the way that these changes can lead to discomfort and pain. And we grieve the sacrifices that all of it requires. My name is Cecy, and I'm your host. Today, we have a very special episode that, for those of you who are watching, will notice was recorded in a slightly different environment before my studio was set up in its usual way. I hope you enjoy this very important conversation. Thank you for joining us. Let's see who's first.
Cozy
So,
workplace.
hi, Tracee Thomas.
It's me.
It's you. Let me tell folks who don't have the privilege of knowing you a little bit about you. So you are an author, you're a coach, you're the founder of Empress Movements, Yoga and Wellness. Oh, we got to talk about that. An ADHD advocate, a neurodiversity ninja. Oh my God. I need a t-shirt that says that, first of all.
I knew you would love it. That was all for you. I was like, okay, we need.
I'm going to figure out how to get this t-shirt. I'm gonna call a friend. More on that soon. And you are first in a lot of things, right? So I have a questionnaire that I ask folks to fill out before they come on here, so I can learn a little bit about their journey. And I have a long list of things that people can select from. And you selected being the first to pursue a career path considered strange or non-traditional, the first to have children in a way that was considered non-traditional, the first to switch religions or leave religion altogether. I want to unpack that. I feel like each of these could be 3-hour conversations. So this is going to be my challenge as I learn how to podcast. It's like, how do you...
Which one of these?
Right. Where do we start? And then you're the first to not speak your native language. You selected. And the first to have acknowledged the history of mental unwellness and neurodivergency in your family, and to separate from some of the traditional immigrant ideas and beliefs that your family holds. That's a lot.
Girl,
that's a lot. And that was probably what you just like thought of while you were doing this.
Right.
There's so many things that we're the first to do that like we don't even think about, like right. I'm fairly certain I'm the first person to actually have a house to paint and hire painters. So I think I'm the first in my family to hire painters.
Right. Yes. And to decorate, like not from the dollar store, like right. To be like, I am going to go buy full furniture at full price. I mean, maybe at the clearance sale, because we got selling, but sales, but at the clearance sale at the good store, like
at the good store, at the fancy store. Yeah. So, okay. So tell us a little bit about your journey, right? I'm sure there, like we said, there's so many different components of firsts and layers and this and that, but how do you sort of tend to describe your narrative? Tell us a little bit about your background and then what led to these firsts that you mentioned.
That's a really great question. Because there's so many different ways that I can think of that where if I looking back, I can just recount being like, this doesn't sit right with my soul. So, so I grew up in a house, my family's from Dominica, tiny island, not the Republic.
Not Dominican Republic, y'all.
Right, not Dominican Republic. Very small, French and English kind of, battle back and forth. So we speak a little bit of little Creole that sounds kind of like Haitian Creole. But the, English is the predominant language. And so my parents migrated here. They're both from the same little tiny village. They both migrated here maybe about 15 years before I was born, maybe 15, 20. And I'm the second of 3 girls. And I was born into a house where I think my mother actually, in a lot of ways, was a unique first. Because my earliest memory of my parents was not of them being married. So they separated. They were married when I was born, but they separated by the time I was like 4 or 6. but I do not remember them ever like being together in the house or liking each other or even speaking to each other. I actually did not see my parents in the same room speaking to each other until I was in my 20s and my mom was in the hospital, like about to pass. And then there was this moment where my father went to visit her and everybody was like standing outside the room, like,
wow.
oh my God, this is happening.
Wow. That must be big.
Yeah, it was wild. It was wild. So I say that because I think the context of how I grew up was very interesting because my mom was like the first one of maybe like anybody in the island community, which was very tight knit when they moved here, to get a divorce, right? Because I was just like, you just didn't do that, you know, like you made it for life. And then
that was like shameful back in the day.
Yeah. And you know, my mom was a hardcore Catholic. So it was like a big deal, right?
Catholic guilt could be like a whole episode.
Episode. Like that's a whole So that's sort of the context that I like came up in. And I remember like being very young, and the context of their divorce was messy, and I won't get into it because it's not necessarily entirely my story to tell. But I remember like in the aftermath and in the fallout, really just being like, yo, mommy, something ain't adding up. Like I was the kid who was like, this story is not, this math is not mathing. Like, you know, but what about, you know, and just always asking questions. And I think from the beginning, my mother and I sort of just clashed in a major way because of that, like asking questions. Cause you know, literally the thing I heard growing up the most is like, little girls should be seen and not heard. Right. And so there was just this expectation that, you know, as a child, especially as a girl child, that you shut up, minded your business, let adults do their thing, and you didn't ask questions. And I was just, and I wasn't even like a precocious kid. Like I just needed things to make sense to me, and you just need to explain to me why. And if it made sense, then I was satisfied. But if not, then I was just going to be like, but what about? And so because of that, I, you know, like I said, my mother and I had this rocky relationship, which again, I think, although a lot of when I look around my family, I'm like, oh, this was a common theme, like mothers and daughters. By the time I think I was around 11 or 12, and I was like, no, like no more of this. Like, I don't like the way you treat me. I'm going to go live with my dad. And that was like,
that's a bold step.
Scandalized. Like it was just like scandal. Like it was just like all hell broke loose. I had the whole community, and you know, and our Dominica is small, so literally half of the island, like the most of the island that immigrated here lives in between where we lived, where I grew up, and like New York. So we all went to the same church. Like all my aunts and uncles that were in Jersey were in the same church. We would all meet up after service on Sunday. So it was like all sides scandalized, like ostracized, like how dare you, like girls should live with their mother, like it's not right. And nobody was interested in like, what would have this little girl leave her mom and her two sisters and go live with her dad? Like nobody asked me that question. That wasn't part of the conversation. It was just like, this is a scandal. We can't have this. But I do credit like that moment in my life with being what gave me permission to step outside the box.
So that first was your first, but not the last.
Right, exactly.
The first of many
like,
first.
Right, exactly. That was the beginning of like, oh, there is a different way.
Well, it's interesting because I like to go back to when you left your mom's house to go to your dad's house. And you said that was kind of like the first of many firsts for you. Yeah. But what was it about, one, what do you think kind of gave you that courage to do that in such a small family, such a tight-knit circle, such like what sounds like really sacred values, right? That you don't go outside the lines for so long. Like you were the first to do that. And then what was it like when you did move with your dad and you did feel the heat from family members and the scandal and all of that? Like, how did you, and you were young, I'm assuming?
Like 12. Yeah, I was
That's mad young. So
preteen.
you're
Right.
12 years old, first time
Right.
saying, I'm not going to do the thing that little girls are supposed to do, which is live with their mother. And you get all this heat. Like, how are you navigating that? And then I want to connect that to when you went to Penn. But tell us.
Ooh, okay. I think the one word answer that's probably I was like trauma.
Trauma. Listen, that's like a subtext of this show.
Right. It's just
first
like,
in the family and
trauma.
Right. Colon trauma.
Literally, because it's
true.
I think having the level of emotional maturity that I had to have growing up in my household. And I think this brings me, connects to this idea of like being the first in my family to acknowledge mental illness or mental unwellness and neurodivergency. Like the amount of maturity I had to have in my household to navigate my mother's sort of like moods and ebbs and flows and and literally just growing up feeling like my mother did not like me, and like, may she rest in peace, like not speaking ill of the dead, but like, that was my feeling. I cannot say that, I cannot confirm or deny that that was actually how she felt, but in the actions that she did or did not do towards me, including things like it's funny because like a lot of people, like a lot of my family members will talk about like how bad I used to get beaten, right? Like I used to, that would like just get my tail whooped and like in a, some would say excessive manner. But that's not even what I remember the most. The thing that was the hardest for me is like, I would be like, my mom would not really directly say like, I love you. She would like write it in a Christmas card on a birthday. But it was very hard for her to like just say like, like expressively, like, I love you, just.
I feel like I've heard that from a lot of Caribbean people.
I guess it's a thing, right? Because even when I talk to like my aunts and try to get, but it's funny because I have a bunch, my family's huge, but my mom had two sisters that she was super close to, another aunt that lives in Jersey and then one that lives in Canada. And I think my saving grace, literally as a child, was my aunt that lives in Jersey, right? Auntie Clario. Shout out to Auntie Clario. I gotta name her because like I'm giving her flowers now.
Yes.
But when I say this lady was so exuberantly filled with like love, right? And the thing that I craved the most as a kid, I would like ask my mom all the time, like, why can't you just say that you love me? Why don't you hug me? You know what I mean? And I guess like now as an adult, knowing like, the 5 love languages or whatever, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess that my love languages were, what do you call it? Words of affirmation and like physical touch. And so to have my mom not provide those things, it was just like, little Tracee was just like, okay, no one loves me. But Auntie Clario would like, whenever she saw me, like she could have just seen me 5 minutes ago and she'd be like, oh, my daughter, like, and like clap and like, and it was just like, okay.
Came through.
Like,
yeah.
This is how I learn love, right? This is how I learn like, oh, like this is what it can feel like.
Shout out to aunties though.
Listen,
like that's such a critical role, especially like for kids like us who grew up in these environments and you are craving that like other love and other attention. In my case, I didn't have my parents around anymore. My aunt taught me everything, all that foundational sort of like emotional development, identity development. Man, aunties, uncles. My uncle was always overseas in the military, but I know a lot of uncles who came through for their kids. They play such a critical role, man. It takes a village.
It's true. It does. Even Bell Hooks talks about this. I think it's in her book, like, lost the headphone. In her book, Bell Hooks talks about this in her book. I think it's Salvation, Black People in Love. And she talks about this idea of like how critical the extended family is because it's the place where you learn that there's another kind of normal, right? So no matter what you see in your own nuclear family, you're like, oh, like there's other ways to live. And you have like, they're your first other examples of like, what else is possible?
Not everybody does it like that, friend.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Like there, you have other options.
Yeah, I always used to observe. Not even I don't have a huge family, so it was usually friends. I would observe the way their family did things, and I was like, "Oh, y'all sit at the table to eat? That's fancy." And I would always just observe how people, like, we didn't have like married people in our family, so when I would see a husband and wife, I'd be like, what y'all doing? Right. It's such a part of the extended family, right? Like, it doesn't have to just be aunties and uncles. It can be neighbors. And
exactly. Yeah. The community, right? Yes. Exactly. That village, like the village, we know the village is not always blood. So to your point, or to your question, which was just kind of, I think, like, how did I like have this, capacity or like make these kind of decisions? I think I can only liken it to trauma. Like, I think just that emotional maturity that I had to develop at an early age, because of what I experienced from my mom, because of just having to navigate in my mind, like her emotional stances and my dad's emotional stances, and being sort of what I felt like a, tug of war in between, or like a, I think I just had to develop this sort of like, very early on, this like, this resilience, and this like, I have to take care of myself. Like, I think very early, I think I can remember like around 10, like the day I made that decision.
Wow.
And so that was it. So it was like, at that point, it was like, who needs parents? Like, I'm gonna tell you what
I got this.
This is what I'm about to do.
It's not look that hard.
Right.
No, but I mean, I think we can laugh about it, but I think it is such a powerful gift that I often talk about that comes out of suffering, right? Essentially, right? Because trauma can mean so many different things, but at the end of the day, there's some form of suffering that feels sort of maybe like the wrong size for where you are in life, or how old you are, or for any human, right? Like, I think that's what trauma can boil down to. But what gifts come out of it, that not to say that like I love trauma, but there's so much beauty and wisdom that comes from going through it and exploring, like you said, like, what do I need right now? Right. Like, unless your back is up against the wall, you're not going to just ask randomly, like, what do I need to survive? What's important to me? Especially not at 12 or 10 years old. Right. So that to me is fascinating, that you were able to sort of extract those values and that very critical life lesson that you carry with you to this day, I assume, from some circumstances that were less than ideal.
Yeah. And I love how you put it, the wrong size of trauma. Like, that's such a, yes. Because it's kind of like, everybody is going to experience some trauma, right? Capital T, whether it's capital T trauma, lowercase t trauma, that, impacts our lives in some ways. But like, like the wrong size, like at 10 and even earlier, to be like, I got to figure out if my dad and my mom are gonna, you know what I mean? Like, is my, I gotta pass notes between two adults because they won't speak, like, that's the wrong size trauma for a 10-year-old. Like, that's, that's, the divine does what the divine does. So who am I to say, to judge it? But it does feel like the wrong size. Like, it does feel like I am not equipped. And although there are these beautiful lessons and these like resilient factors that come out of it, I think the challenge becomes when you don't realize that it does not have to be who you are. Right.
Say more about that.
Yeah. So this like learning of independence I had, and like, I could do it all by myself, like that carries into every aspect of my life. Right. Yes. And I was literally just talking to my therapist this morning, and I'm like, I don't know how to ask for help. Like, I don't, like, I don't even realize when I need help, and then I don't know how to ask for it. I don't know who to ask for it. And then when I don't get help, I'm like, oh, no one loves me. Everyone hates me. I have to do it by myself.
Why won't all these people that I didn't ask for help from help me?
Right.
That's what I used to do a lot.
Right. Exactly.
How dare you not know exactly what I need without me telling you?
don't I look like I need help?
Right. No, you don't actually.
Right. And
you're very
therein lies the problem.
Yeah.
Therein lies the problem. It's like
Right.
it becomes your identity, and it becomes literally so ingrained in you that even when it does not benefit you, it is still remains such a large part of who you are that you don't know how to separate yourself from like this thing that you had to develop as a coping mechanism.
Which is ironic to me, and almost like poetic in a maybe dark way, that trauma we're talking about develops or instills us with these like tools, these very valuable tools that to this day I'm like thankful for, right? Not thankful for trauma, but thankful for the tools that came out of it. Right? But you developed them from some tough situations as a little kid to cope with life. And now, right, we can talk about in a few minutes, like what it takes to unlearn those things and rewire the brain. But the ironic part that I was talking about is that that's probably exactly what your mom was doing as well, right? Like she had been wired a certain way because of her trauma and her mom's trauma and her mom's mom's trauma, right? And it inculcates you with these survival tools, like we were talking about before, that maybe prevented her from being able to access that emotion that you wanted, that affirmation that you wanted. So it's like generationally, our trauma continues to block us. Right. It's just continues to come up and come up. And I mean, my theory is that our generation is among the first to actually interrogate that.
Yes.
Right. To explore not just like what happened to me when I was a kid, I went through stuff, but how does my entire living suffering show up inside of me today? Right. That's deep.
Girl, that's why we so tired.
Listen,
they be like, why are millennials burnt out? Because we are healing 18 generations of
yeah, you're welcome. I'm gonna say what your mom said. You're welcome.
Right, you're welcome. Right.
It's true though. It's true.
Like I think the big like aha moment for me was like my mom. So my mom passed away when she was 58.
I'm sorry.
And she had worked her whole life in New Jersey Transit, which is like a semi-government position, so she was going to retire with them good benefits and, she did the things she was supposed to do. Like now, interesting kind of aside, but very related. And why I consider myself a neurodivergency ninja is because when my mom passed, I got very interested in learning like who she was and then recognizing like how much I was like her and all of the things in which we, I guess, when your mom, you just sort of just start like paralleling your life. Right.
Yeah.
And so, my dad shared with me, like, my mom had like 8 different majors. She like changed colleges like 4 times. She initially wanted to be a doctor and then she majored in business. And then she finally just ended up getting this job at New Jersey Transit. And then I remember at some point in my, like, maybe when I was in high school, she was thinking about going back to school to get her master's degree in like education or psychology or something like that. Wow. And I was like, man, if that ain't all the signs of ADHD.
Are you your mom?
Combined with the fact that my mother was 3 hours late to her own wedding. I was like, see, my mother was literally, people would have events and they would give my mother a fake out time that was 2 hours earlier and she would still show up late.
I have a girlfriend like that.
we might know somebody.
Wait a minute. So this is very interesting. And okay, so I think this is a good segue into that exploration thing that you've already been talking about, but not only are you navigating sort of this child of immigrants, right? Because you were born here, right?
Yeah, I was born here. Yeah.
Born here. So children of immigrants, unlearning, relearning. Now you go to a place like Penn, University of Pennsylvania, for college. You were not the first in your family to go to college, but you were the first. I love the way you put it. You were the first in your family to navigate college as in a different way.
Right.
So explain to me, and now you're learning now I don't know the chronology of it, so put it together for me. Now you're also learning like your mom may have had ADHD. And so tell me about being the first in the family to navigate college the way you did. And then I'd love to hear like how we get over to the neurodivergent ninja.
Ninja, yeah.
So let's talk about college first, and then I want to explore how that connects too.
So let's see. So navigating college as a first generation American kid, again, just kind of stayed in this box. And so I wasn't diagnosed with until I was in my early 30s, right? Which was an amazing game changer. And this is why I'm like, I consider myself an ADHD advocate, and actually later also find out that I have a form of autism as well. And so that combination, when I look back on my life, I'm like, oh, like the dots just start to connect, right? Like it's also why as a kid, like I was like, I need direct and clear answers because the autistic brain is like, you do not make sense. Like make it make sense. And literally could not function until somebody made it make sense for me.
Yes.
And to the point where I was like, I can't live in this house no more because this don't make sense.
So I'm sure you were the first in your family to even name that.
Right. Right. And so this is like, the other thing I didn't mention about growing up, which is definitely relatable, is that I skipped fourth grade because
smart.
Oh, girl, I started reading it too. Again. Ooh. Right. Started reading like full, like I literally.
Yeah, I started reading at 3. I thought I was doing something.
No, girl, 2, late. Like, get on my level. Hey,
my bad.
Like 2, like full out books. Like I would read to my kindergarten class. Like I was like, and my parents were just like, okay, we got a smart kid, but literally in school, I would just be
do the dishes. Shut up.
Right. Exactly.
That's what my family would do.
Right. Oh, you can read, go read.
That's
okay,
cute.
Go back. Right. That's cute, but go do the chores.
Right.
And then you
better read that soap. It wouldn't even make sense. Better read that sponge. What?
Ma'am.
I don't make no sense. Okay, go.
So I had this pattern. So I skipped fourth grade. I am always like read at like 2 or 3 reading levels and everything else in head of my class. And so by the time we got to fourth grade, they were just like, okay, she's reading at an 8th grade level. She's doing math at 8th grade level. Wow. We don't know what to do with her, but the very least we could do is like skip this grade because she doesn't need fourth grade. So because I started reading early, I started school early. I was literally like 2 years younger than all of my peers for most of the day. Right. So you got the trauma combined with hanging out with older kids, combined with reading everything in sight. So I was this little like nerdy, like emotionally overdeveloped, resilient.
Right. Like, oh, what a poor baby.
Yeah, right.
I want to hug her.
I know.
I love how the 80s answer or like even 90s answer to like a high performing child with different needs is, let's give them more stress.
Right.
I have an idea.
Let's see if we add.
Let's completely take them away from everything they know and just like mess them up.
Make it harder.
That'll work.
But that probably saved me, in some ways saved me, but also probably kept me from actually being diagnosed till very later on in life. Because what I've noticed about my neurodivergent peoples is that as long as you're staying out of trouble, nobody thinks like, oh, there might be something else going on here, right? Never. Like if you're a good kid, for the most part. Now, the funny thing is I was mostly a good kid because I was smart, but I would have these random like emotional outbursts, which again, emotional dysregulation is very much in line with ADHD. But, because it was the 80s, because my parents are Black, because my parents are Caribbean, that was not even like a consideration.
Right, of course.
So I give you that context to talk about, I didn't get, when I should have known officially, I mean, I should have known in undergrad, but my grad school life my grad school thesis, 50-page paper. And Tracee Thomas thought that I could write it the night before it was due.
Oh, yeah, because that's how I got through college. That's not
right. That's what I did, right? And and I literally did not know. It wasn't like a choice, like, oh yeah, I could do the draft and whatever, and I'll leave it. It was like I didn't, in my brain, there was no concept and context for like, most people would break this up into chunks or do a draft or like that. Boop, 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 does not compute.
Listen, that was my college career.
Compute. Right.
If it wasn't for the last minute, nothing would get done. Okay?
Right. It was like there's no minute like the last minute. And so when I finally get diagnosed and they're like, well, do you have problems with time management? Are you time blind? Do you not realize when a 40-page paper is going to take you more than a night?
Right. Huh?
And I'm like, oh, huh.
Right.
This is the thing. But then it's like, so I start making connections between like the way, like how my existence was starting to unfold and like my mom's existence, right? And I'm like, oh, like time blindness, having trouble, starting tasks, having trouble organizing things, always, what's the other one? Dissatisfaction with career, like being super smart, but just having trouble like staying in a lane and just driving through it, and I was just like, oh, like, yeah, like this is me and this is my mama. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, imagine, like, I am a child of the 80s. So we, I think ADHD was just starting to become a thing, but it was mostly like, stories about like hyperactive white little boys. So I'm like, I know my mama didn't have any sort of like resource context, special education, getting skipped to grade. Like she had none of that.
Right.
And then stories that she started telling me, about her past started making sense. Like my mom told me that for a year, right after her mom died, and this is again that genetic thing, because my mom's mom, my grandmother, died when my mom was 12.
Oh, wow.
Right. So my mom was from 12 on basically raised by her sisters. And her mom died when she was 51. Right. So I have this generational thing of, my mother's not living beyond maybe 60. And, but my mom tells me after her mom died, she goes to live with her brother and she stops talking for a year just to see if anyone would notice. And I was like, wow. That's weird. That's weird.
Why?
But like, right. But wow, like,
wow. Oh,
wow.
There's so much to unpack there.
And it just made me like feel for her in a different way. And it just made me start to think about like beyond this person who I had all this contention with when I was growing up. It was like, sorry. Oh, no. It was like, who is this woman? Who is this? Who was she? Like, who was she? And what did she go through, kind of to your point, that had her be who she was to me, and how she was to me. Yeah. So I think I started saying, so the thing that, so
college,
all of that. Yeah. So all of that, my mom passed when I was 24. So I'm in Penn. I stay in this little bubble. I don't really, I end up becoming a teacher because this is kind of like the path of least resistance, right? Like I have all these dreams in high school, in college. I think I joke, my biggest regrets were not becoming part of our African dance troupe on campus. And I never even tried out. I just would like stand. Like I would just go to the shows and be like, oh my God, I wish I had African rhythms. And then we had there was a fashion club that started when I was at Penn, and there was a magazine that started with Penn. And I just was so scared, as much as I loved writing. And I always there was a part of me as a kid that dreamed about being a writer and being a psychologist. Like I just, it was just that fear. And I remember my freshman year, I took a psychology class, right? And again, because not knowing how to navigate, not knowing like understanding how I learn and that like small class sizes and things I need, I get a C in my first psychology class. And I was just like, I don't get C's. Like this is, I can't,
That happened to me with math. When I got to college and I started taking all these crazy calculus beyond courses, I was like, oh, I thought I was good at math.
Right. And they don't tell you what I didn't learn until I was like getting my master's in education is this idea of like, you know, like grit and resilience and like that ability to like, you know, I think especially they say girls are taught like when something is hard, it just means we're incapable. Right. So it's like, and this is why a lot of girls are like, well, I'm good at English and I'm good at, because it's like the thing that almost comes like naturally to us.
Wow.
But if we don't, and they say that you don't just tell, especially girls, that they're smart, like praise them for like
the actual skill or ability,
the work, like pushing, right, pushing through, like, oh my God, that was hard. And you know, you work to try to figure it out, you know, and encouraging that, because literally if I had that sort of like twist in thinking or that like little piece of thinking, like my whole trajectory would have gone completely differently. Wow. But I tapped out after that first C. Like, mind you, this was like a 300-person lecture. I think we had like 3 tests that determine our grade. I also, because of time blindness and because I ain't had nobody telling me to wake up, I don't know how many times I actually went to class. Didn't know how to study, you know what I mean? But because of my brain, I was like, oh no, there's something wrong with me. I can't do this. So like, on that dream. Yeah. Yeah, so that was like kind of my college career. And so I ended up kind of like gravitating towards the things that were interesting to me and the things that I liked and that I could engage in without sort of like stress or, you know, and I got what I got. Yeah. You know, yeah.
How do you think, I know you said that you would have, if you could go back, you would have maybe explored more and not been so scared not to try out for the dance team. How do you, what does that look like? Right. I know we talked about fear and sort of like this predisposition for doing what's practical. But what does it actually look like to navigate life or college? We'll just start with college in a free way. And 2, I guess this is more hypothetical, but I think about when my kids grow up, how they're going to navigate a space like college. Right. And I'm going to be pissed if they're going to be like, I want to sculpt small feet and like, you know, or I want to just sell t-shirts. You know, like I already feel myself doing what our parents and our grandparents did and we hated. Yeah. So I'm curious, 1, what does it look like? What would it look like for you? And then what does the next generation look like and how do we not judge it? I guess is my question.
Yeah, no, that's really good. So I think for me, it is the freedom to explore, right? And I think that is, you know, what I encourage my younger generation. I don't have children yet, you know, but I got a lot of little babies that are part of my village and that I love dearly. And I'm always like, listen, try it. You know what I mean? Like, that's it. Like, try it at least once, you know, almost anything. Stay away from crack. Don't do that. That's not, that's everything else.
Crack is whack.
Right. Crack is whack. Try at least once, you know, but like, so that you can have the experience, right? And that culmination of all these experiences will help you, you know, even just be more clear about what you do want, you know, because a lot of it will just be like, oh, I don't want that. I don't want that. I don't want it. Now, I do think, to your point, when I think about what I want for like the next generation, I think about the world, the moment that we're in now, right? And we're in this moment where people are finally like, I think there is a, like, in the zeitgeist, in the like sort of national conversation, there is, you know, where people are talking about the soft life. People are talking about like, let's end hustle culture. People are talking about, you know, abolition. People are talking about all of these things, which are like fundamentally interrupting the way that this country has operated and the world has operated for, you know, for our lifetime and for the last few lifetimes, right? And so I'm often like, well, what are our children even going to grow up into, right? Because either they're going to grow up in a place where these like acts of and requests for revolution and transformation are actually come to fruition, right? And their world will be very different than ours was, or these requests or these demands for change will not be met. And if we continue on the trajectory that we're going in without transformation, that's also a world that I'm like, I don't know how to prepare them for that either.
Right. Right. And there's no way of knowing what the, although I will say, Gen Z, as much as I talk crap with them about them with my friends, apologies to Gen Zers listening. What I will say is Gen Z is at the helm of that. And what they've been doing to disrupt these patterns and these archaic ways that people have been doing everything, right? Like business, school, health, wellness, like all of it.
Right.
They have really been the ones, the champions saying, nope, that's
right.
Nope.
Right.
I think that part is always sobering for me, and humbling is the better word, because I feel myself, I'm 40 now, I feel myself turning into the curmudgeon. These kids these days, they don't know how good they have.
Get off of my lawn.
Right? I feel it. It's coming. I got my first gray hair, and it just sort of is implanting my
solidified,
brain. Right. It just changes your brain chemistry. No, but I feel like there's a part of me that's like, the world that you just described with abolition and joy and freedom and all of this, I'm like, yeah, right. That ain't happening. Right?
Joy and freedom, all that.
Right. That's dreaming, buddy. But when I see Gen Z doing what they're doing, I mean, they're disrupting Wall Street, not like the cute little school group that they created, right? They're disrupting Wall Street. They're disrupting the bank, the way we consume, the way we eat, the way, right? And now I'm like, oh, maybe it's
wait a minute,
not that far away.
Right. But I mean, think about it. Millennials, you know, people be always trying to play us, but I'm like, we paved the way for that, right? Like we have lived through like 3 major, like almost world-ending cataclysmic events in our adulthood. You know what I mean? And still we're like, you know what? But we're going to create an Uber, but we're going to create a Facebook, but we're going to, you know, make it so that we can communicate even if we're in a global pandemic and are in lockdown, you know, like
our generation has been the like bridge between pre-technology and current technology. And we gave birth to this.
Literally
quite and figuratively. No, absolutely. I mean, I have this conversation often when I complain about Gen Z. I'm sorry, I need to really stop complaining about Gen Z so much, but they can be annoying. I'm gonna try to
I need some more Gen Zers in my life. I feel like, you know,
do you?
I don't know.
I love Gen Z.
Again, just knowing what I know now, I think the important things that I, if I could do it over, or if I would, you know, had a wish, I would say like, I wish that I understood the way my brain works. Then I think that I wish that I would have had the courage to try things, and that I would not have let self-doubt be the thing that kept me from exploring. Right.
So I love the way you described the next generation as not necessarily landing in a specific place, right? You said it really beautifully. I'm probably going to mess it up, but like going to college without that self-doubt, without that strict adherence to what you're supposed to do. I love the knowing your brain thing, because I wish I would have known my brain. Oh my gosh. But So not necessarily landing in a specific industry or job or not landing somewhere, but really the how you're landing, right? The soft landing.
The soft, right.
The seatbelt on with no turbulence, right? Like land where you gotta land, right?
But that's cool. Do it this way. You're right. Because think about it. Think about how much even the nature of work has changed in our lifetime. So when our kid, you know, like now being a gamer is like a thing. Like you could just like play video games and that's your job, right? Like I don't know how to teach my child to be a gamer, but what I can say is if you are passionate about something and you love it, you know, pursue that. What I can say is, hey, you should learn some entrepreneurial skills because that's probably going to be an important component about being able to feed yourself. Hey, here's some money skills because you need to know how much stuff costs because as much as I love you, you're not going to live off me for the rest of your life. But even that is such an interesting point, right? Because again, like my mom left me a little something when she died, but she didn't have like she didn't have like this generational wealth that we're talking about, now. Right. And so I think about this. So I'm like, okay, so we're, have all these great jobs. We're saving money, we're learning about life insurance earlier. We're like investing. We got real estate portfolios, whatever. We got all of this stuff that we're amassing for our children. And I'm just like, so do they need to get real jobs if we're like, hey, we're going to leave you $1 million? Like what?
Yeah. Well, this is the question. Yeah. And I think what's challenging, I don't know the answer to that, by the way, because I'm very conflicted, but I think what's challenging is that you are working towards that, right? Like my parents and my grandparents busted their ass so that I could go to college, right? I was the first in the family to go to college and have a house and do all the things that I'm doing now. And I think I've been working very hard to get to, right? Like a different type of work hard than my predecessors. And here I am, right? For all intents and purposes, successful, still working hard, right? Like my husband and I have to work until we're 65. We've done the math, unless something shifts, unless this podcast blows up, right? Like we're going to probably be working until we're 65. However, maybe 60. However, it's challenging to think that my children may not inherit the same sort of desire to think about the future at all times or to grind a little bit or like I've always been an overachiever. My therapist and I are working on that and what that really means.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah. But to your point earlier, it was something that society has always valued and always rewarded, right? Yeah. And because of that, I always saw it as a necessary thing to do no matter what, right? Like whether you're sweeping the floor or getting a degree, you do that shit with like every fiber in your being.
Right.
And I right now intellectually can tell you everything that is toxic about that trait. I can go over all the ways that has actually hindered me. And yet the thought of my kids not working very hard to put their best foot forward in every single project that they do to the point of overachieving and being the best, it doesn't sit well with me. It doesn't sit well to think. Right. Because in my head, that means lazy.
Yeah.
I mean, entitled.
That's a whole nother.
I know, lazy, such a hard word. But that means entitled. That means, in Spanish, we say ñoño, like spoiled.
Right.
And so if your kid gets called ñoño, that's like, you don't know how to raise kids. They're little brats. And that's the ultimate diss. And I get anxiety. Even intellectually, I understand. I understand the toxicity that comes with these old values and these ideas that I have to, in order to have value and worth in my own identity, I have to work for you and you have to give me. Get it. Get it. But when my 8-year-old doesn't want to like participate in the writing contest and win, I am perplexed.
What is wrong with you? You don't want to child are you?
Right. Like what? You just scribbled that and you didn't make your letters perfect? I don't even know what my question was anymore.
Right. I'm like, I just need my 8-year-old to win the contest.
Right. Okay, I'm gonna bring it back. I have to call my therapist after this before I go. But I struggle with what are we working towards? Right?
Yeah.
I don't know that our parents knew. I don't know that our grandparents knew. Obviously, they dealt with things that we're not dealing with, right? So at that point, it was survival, maybe liberation, right? Freedom, rights. We have come up in a different generation. So what are we? What is millennials working for the next generation? And again, how do you reconcile the values that we've been privileged to learn about that I think the newer generations may not be able to access as much? Does that make sense? I know I went deep.
No, it does.
I love
wow, I'm like,
I love them. I really love them.
Oh my gosh. I think for me, this is where my like spiritual practice and being a yogi comes in. You know, because when you really, you know, they say, what is it? Anxiety is, you know, worrying too much about the future, and depression is like thinking too much about the past.
Oh,
right?
I don't know that I've ever heard that.
Listen, girl, you know the gems. That's it. Anxiety, too much about the future, depression, too much about the past, you know?
That's real.
And the reality of it is what we have is this now moment, right? And so, you know, for me, having, you know, a mother that did not make it to retirement, it really sort of like pronounced that like nowness for me, that like there is no like wait until we retire. And then it's like, how do I live a life right now that feels good? And that doesn't mean that like everything is perfect, everything is in line, but it means that like, what do I not necessarily have to delay? You know, like what choices can I make that I can say, like, if something were to happen to me tomorrow, I would be like, you know what? It's okay. Cause I did the damn thing, you know, I did the things, or at least I was on the way to doing, you know what I mean? And I wasn't planning for some distant future that may or may not ever come.
Yeah.
And so when I think about our children, again, like we have no idea what the world is going to look like. Right. And I think the things that our children remember is like how much we love them, the values that we attempted to instill in them. And for me, like, I want our babies to be like good people. You know, like there's so many, like, I think what we have seen as millennials in our lifetime is that a lot of shitty people have a lot of power and have a lot of money and have a lot of access. And we have learned that those things do not necessarily make you a better person. They don't make you happier. You know, like I think there was a study I read that said like beyond $300,000 of like making $300,000 a year, there's no like difference in.
Oh, I think I've seen that.
You know what I mean? Like
levels.
Happy, exactly. Like you're happy, like more beyond that. I'm like $300,000 is still like a nice little.
Let me hold that though.
Right. You know, I'm like, okay, we can get there. Let me test this theory out, right?
But you don't need much more beyond that.
You know, and I think that is what we've seen in our lifetime. Like we did the scramble to like have the biggest jobs and make the most money. And then we got there and we're like, that in and of itself was not as fulfilling as we thought it would be, you know, like, it's nice to have the house and it's nice to be like, I invested it and I did this. But then at the end of the day, the things that really matter, and this is my big thing, and which is why like I even started coaching, I even started sharing, I even started yoga, is because people don't know how to have relationships. Like
that's really true.
Like the thing that I think that we're losing the most is like those intimate communal connections that our parents had, right? That they had to be interdependent and rely on each other and like have this village. And I think now we are, because we have so much money, because we have so much access, we are more isolated than we've ever been. Because everybody is like, well, I got my house, you know, like I look literally in my own family, I think about like when each of my mom's siblings came up, like one would come up. I think the first person to come up was my uncle, and my uncle like made a little fortune in England. He came to New York. He had this real estate, and each person would come up. They would live in one of his apartments, and then they would go buy their own home, right? And then
Wow.
that person bought a home and they would sponsor the next person, and that person would come up and they would live in either like, they would share a house, they would live in the basement.
Yeah.
And then, it was like, and so
cooperative economics.
Right. Cooperative economics. Right. And that's just how it like snowballed.
Yeah.
But now I look at sort of like the next generation of cousins. And on one hand, it's beautiful because we have like, folks are like in Texas and Florida, like folks have, gone to find their place in the world. But there's some cousins, I can't tell you the last time I saw them. We don't, and back in the day, I hate this time, there was a party for everything.
Party.
Like it was like, first communion, second communion.
Yeah. Yeah. Second.
And the summer, the baby shower, the baby blink for the first time. Like it was like, there was always a reason to be in community.
Yes.
And if you think about it now, it's just like, we have all this money, we have all this house, and there's nobody ever in it, right? There's nobody there except our, nuclear family. And I think that that's really the thing that I think that is left to figure out, like, I think that for us is like, how do we got all the trappings, we got all the success, but now how do we create these deep, intimate connections? Because real rap, like the revolution that we're calling for, is in community, right?
Yeah.
Because right now there's so much reliance on the state, on the government to like do the things that people used to do, right? Like even go like, if we think about like maternal health for Black women, like this movement to bring back doulas and like midwives, like that is something that we used to do instinctively in community, calling for abolition. Like the whole movement is like, well, if there's public safety, if the community is connected, and we can go back to the time when, everybody could discipline Lil Ray Ray, and Lil Ray Ray didn't end up, terrorizing the block, like, right. Like these are the things that actually weave the fabric of like how we take the power back from powers that be dictating how we live our lives.
So, philosophical question. I feel you. And I think we are working towards that. I think the part that's ironic, especially for the theme of the show, right? First in the family, is, I don't know if maybe this is just cyclical, right? Maybe every 40 generations, something happens like this where you go right back to the starting point. I don't know, right? I probably can make a case by looking at history books. However, my question is, what you're describing feels like a lot of people who have been first in their family to break out of, maybe intending to break out of the more toxic pieces of, right? Nobody said, oh, Uncle Ray in England, I want to break away from him helping people because helping people is stupid, right? Like, I don't imagine every cousin did that, but they might have said like, I don't want to stay in England, or I don't want to do what he did, or actually, I don't want people in my house, or what, maybe they made a different decision than Uncle Ray did. And as a result of thousands of more of those types of decisions, now the fabric of your family has fundamentally shifted. And now you're in a new space. Maybe it's not bad, maybe it's not good, maybe, it's just a new space, right? We won't even place value on it. But as a generation, we are now seeking what Uncle Ray had access to, right? That community, village thinking, the cooperative economics we talked about. So I guess my question is, those firsts that happen in your family, are they benefiting your family? That happen across all families, right? Because this is true for my family as well. And I'm sure lots of people watching or listening, this is true for them as well. But are firsts always good? And what's lost when you become first in your family to do a thing? And how do you know if it's worth it?
Questions that need answers.
You have 3 more hours? Because
right,
we can really crack this one.
So in my dissertation on Oh man, I think, all right, so let's see. Is what I heard is like, is being first worth it? And like,
Always good.
Is it always good? Right. And I mean, from a sociological perspective, because I'm a nerd and when I don't understand something, I like to read up on it. So took a random sociology class. It's like, I need to know this.
That was my major. Shout out.
Yes, shout out to sociology. But one of the things that I remember taking away from it was that just this kind of the progression of, I forget the official term for it, but it's literally like, this is a pattern in economic mobility, right? Like, first there's this nuclear clan, then somebody has to break away in order to like usually bring in more money. And then because they broke away, their ideas expand. And then you have this thing. So, you know, when we talk about like economic mobility and like wanting more and wanting to expand, you know, what we've been given for our family, like it's like somebody has to be first, like somebody has to break out. Somebody had to leave the tiny island of 68,000 people in my family to come to America so that we could even be having this conversation.
Right.
I think firsts are important. I think when it becomes troubling or problematic is when we only talk about what went wrong with the firsts, which is what I think sometimes our current conversation can be. And I kind of mentioned that before with like, we're always talking about generational curses. And I very rarely hear people talking about like, what are the generational blessings? What are the ancestral gifts, right? Like, because we're not, you know what I mean? I think that's human nature to like focus on what's wrong. But I'm like, if we don't sort of like siphon through, or as my Ghanaian folks would say, like, take the fish and leave the, you know, take the meat and leave the bones, you know, like we kind of really like, got to pick it apart and say like what worked for them, what didn't work for them, right? What are the pieces that I want to take and I want to make sure that my children also have, and what are the things that just weren't really actually healthy and that we don't need to continue, right?
Yes.
And then I think in terms of the village, I think this is the part that I'm still figuring out, right? Because there's this one hand where Dominica is such a tiny island, is such a specific and unique culture that it's almost like I don't think anybody else can understand like Dominican culture the way another Dominican can, right?
Okay.
You know, and I get it's kind of, and then, you know, I'm sure that's specifically like you being from Dykeman, right? Like nobody is going to understand what it means for you to be from like as like somebody else, right? Exactly. You know, like nobody's going to get that part of you. So there's a like, there's a comfort and like a nostalgia and like I think almost like a vulnerability that comes with like, you get it, right? Like you're this person who understands you're from the block, like you understand you're from the village. You get it when I make a reference to, you know, so many references, you know what I mean? Like you get it.
Yeah.
But then it's like, but then when I leave and I become a first from the village to move away, or you leave Dykeman and you move to Atlanta, it's like, okay, oh, now there's this like different culture that, you know, Dykeman is still in my heart, but now I'm a Georgia peach. And now like that unique combination is difficult to like find someone that like gets that, right?
Yes.
And like completely understands that whole picture, what those two things mean together.
Yes.
And so I think what I'm kind of understanding is like the next evolution of like tribe and clan and village is going to be based on like our values, right? And I think it's not going to be so sort of like geographically specific as much as it's going to be, yo, I rock with you because we think alike. I rock with you because, you know, we want to raise our children in the same way. I rock with you because you're hilarious and we make the same ridiculous 90s joke references, you know? You know what I mean? Like whatever the things that are most important to you, I think we're going to have to learn to start sort of recreating our villages around that, and then having these like concentric circles, which I think you're amazing at, right? Like you have these circles of communities that you often like bring together, and then they form sort of like new communities around the people in those concentric communities that are like, oh yeah, I vibe with you. Like let's create this kind of new village. Yeah. It's amazing. And I think that's where we're sort of like heading to, and I think that also comes though from exploration, right? And being like, hey, I live in this city that I don't really feel vibes with who I'm becoming or what I believe in or what I really want for myself. So let me go somewhere that does. And then I meet people who were kind of aligned in that way because we ended up in the same place, So it's almost like we're going back to the geographical thing, but it's like a roundabout way to get there.
Well, I think what's really beautiful about what you're illustrating is we are trying to get back to that like original source community energy, right?
Right.
That's what we're trying to get back to. But I think what you're naming in so many words is that we didn't have the level of freedom, right, and resources to even enjoy that space when we had it. Right. Which is why all the firsts have to occur. And maybe you are coming back to the same place, but the same places might only be, geographically the same place, but spiritually so much more enriched and so much freer to make different choices. And I love that you said it's all rooted in the values. And I think that's what I'm taking away from today, because I really do struggle with this. I really do struggle with like, well, what kind of life do I want my kids to have?
Yeah.
What are the pieces that is going to make them like spoiled little entitled kid, right? Like, how do I adjust for that? How do I really struggle with it. But what I'm taking away is there are generational gems, like you talked about, that I already have, right? That even though I was the first to do this long laundry list of things, I still hold on to that, those generational gems. And I like the idea of, I'm not trying to get away from something. I'm actually trying to find my way back to it.
Yeah.
Because I think where I have struggled as being the first in the family, and a lot of people I talk to, is being first feels like you're just getting farther and farther, more disconnected, right? People who know about the 90s, who know about that, right? Like I live in the South now. Not everybody gets my jokes down here. They used to kill. Not everybody gets them here, right? And that's hard, right? That's like a silly example, but it's hard to be but it doesn't have to. I think the reframe is, this is a step towards returning to community. And like you said, the community that I form, and you said, I love to have my worlds mix up. That community is not going to look like my great grandma's community.
Right.
First of all, it's going to be here on mainland United States, right? Not in Puerto Rico, not in Ecuador, right? But also it's going to look different. It's going to have different types of people. It's going to have different ethnicities of people. But if the values, right, I wrote this down in my notebook, but if the values are there, then we are going back to that source of community. Yes. And I like that so much better than in my head. In my head, I'm like,
win the contest. You win the race
contest, damn it. Otherwise, what's it all for? I love that. I think that's a gem that I'm taking from just talking. That's really helpful context.
Yeah. And you gotta give yourself grace. And we as first gen folks got to give ourselves grace, because we're figuring this shit out. And we don't have anybody. Can I say shit on the podcast? We're figuring this thing out, and we don't have anyone to ask, right? Like, or, but the beautiful thing about what you're doing is we do, right? Because we have this beautiful technology that we can be like, hey, wait a minute. Not only am I going to ask you, but can I record this so that other people who may not be in our geographic vicinity can hear
literally why I created this. Literally why I created this. Yeah.
Because values, right? Because it's like there is something that is so important about leaving this generational gem, right? Because like one day your kids will listen to this podcast and they will have an aha moment about like, right? I know, it's so beautiful, but for real, right? Like this is the equivalent of like Zora Neale Hurston, like, writing like anthropology and, Harriet Tubman, right? And Frederick Douglass even being enslaved and writing a memoir because he was like, listen, folks need to know, right? And this is the modern day
written records.
right?
Yeah.
This is the record or the audible record, the visual record, right? Because they even get to see, like, this is like, so I think this is like,
that's so good.
It's so important. And we gotta be graceful and gracious to ourselves to say like, yo, we're learning in real time. And we're going to figure it out as we go. And yes, you want the best for your children. Everyone wants the best. But we also have to remember how much of this like puritanical slavery capitalist mindset is like deeply embedded in every breath that we take, right? And if we really start to unpack, like, okay, why do I want him to run the writing contest? Okay, so he could be the best. Okay, why do I want him to be the best? Okay, so he can get into good school. Okay, why do I want him to go to school? So he can make a lot of money. Wait, why do I need, and just start to interrogate that line and be like, wait a minute, do I actually believe that his value is in winning the contest? Or do I, like exactly what he produces?
And why did I need that? Right? Like, why did I need that as like, I wanted to be loved and affirmed. Right. Got it. I don't need to love and affirm him in that way.
Right. Because he is because you have done the work that them boys wake up in the morning and they know that they are loved and affirmed, right? They are constantly receiving affirmations, not only from you and their dad, but you all have also created this village that is like, we love these boys. What are they up to? Oh, they like engineering. We're going to get them some building blocks. Oh, they, and just, and one other thing that made me think of, I think there's like two school of parents that I'm witnessing. And I think there's one school of parents that is like, the world is harsh. The world is hard. You need to figure out, like, I need to get you prepared for this hard, cruel world. So that's how I'm going to raise you, like, so that you know how to navigate hard stuff. And then this other school is who are like, the world kind of sucks, but I want you to know that you always have a safe place here in my home with your parents. Like, this is the place that you can land when the world is cruel and cold.
Yeah. Yeah.
I haven't been around long enough to see the long-term effects of either, well, no, I mean, because I think, I, speaking for myself, come from the generation of like, the world is hard and cruel, and we're kind of gonna prepare you for that in the house. So I guess I could say I haven't seen the long-term effects of we're going to be your safe space. But looking back over my life and thinking about all the times that it would have been amazing to have a safe place to land with the people that gave birth to me. I think it's just so important that we at least try to say, like, if everywhere else in the world is going to be hard and cruel and scary and judge me and whatever, the one place that you don't have to worry about that is in the house where you were raised and the people that like brought you to this planet.
Yes. So beautifully said. I love that. I love that. Thank you I think that's a great closing thought. Such a powerful way to bring it home, and literally, and just I think what again, what I'm taking away and the words that sort of stood out to me, and I hope our listeners and viewers are taking away, is it really comes down to values, right? You use that word over and over again, and I think it's easy to lose sight of them, right? It's easy to get caught up in the new thing, the new race, the new whatever the societal thing that you're supposed to attain, right? 50 years ago looked very different than today, but it's easy to lose sight of those values. But ultimately, again, it's not where you land, it's how you land. And we're working on that how part, which is really beautiful. Really beautiful. Tracee, thank you. This was so fun. I feel like I needed a glass of wine the whole time.
I know.
Maybe we should do this
for the next interview.
8 o'clock at night. I might change the whole composition of this. It was so great talking. I know we could have talked for like 4 more
I
hours.
know, it's true.
And we can. Because podcasts have no rules, is what
It's
I'm learning.
true. Please welcome our 8-hour long podcast.
You're welcome. That's the other line I'm taking away from today.
Right.
You're welcome.
You're
welcome.
welcome.
And today, what this might sound silly, but I'm serious. The story that I took away from today that I want to share with people, because I heard a lot of healing words, right? I heard values, I heard grace, right? I heard forgiveness, I heard you're welcome. But it reminded me of the Dr. Seuss story, The Sneetches.
Yes.
I know Dr. Seuss is a little polarizing, but I fucks with the Sneetches. And the reason why is because similar to what we've been talking about is like the Sneetches had the 2 groups. I forget what the groups' names are, but one had stars on their belly. And some dude came around, probably a capitalist, and had his machine that took away stars. And so all the people with stars got their stars taken away. And then the people without the stars got the stars put back on. Moral of the story is this dude walks away with all this money and nobody knows who's a part of which group. Some got stars, some don't, or whatever. But it reminds me of what we're talking about today. It's like, it's really hard to be first. But at the end of the day, we're all trying to get the same thing, right? Validation, love, affirmation, in some form or another. So let's not get distracted by the, how does it happen? Is it this? Is it the house? Is it the job? Is it ultimately, right? It's not where you land, it's how you land. So I'm so thankful for you actually helping me work through a couple of things. You know, my kids just got home from school. I can hear them and I need to go give them a hug and be like, sorry.
I love you.
Mama's doing the best she can.
You don't have to enter the contest.
Don't enter. No more contests for you ever.
That's gonna be the metaphor for life.
I know. Next time you're overperforming, be like, I don't need to enter the contest.
Be like, I'm not entering the contest. I'm not winning the writing contest.
My therapist actually has the code word. She tells me, she calls it overfunctioning when I'm overachieving. She's like, are you overachieving? She's like, just vacuum the middles. Is what she said.
I love that.
Vacuum the middles. You don't have to vacuum the corners and dust off the baseboards. Just vacuum the middles and the room is fine. And so when I'm doing the most, I say just
vacuum the middles. Yes.
So I impart that with you all as well. I hope. Right. Shout out to my therapist.
Shout out to all the therapists, man. They out here doing the Lord's
all
work.
of y'all.
The Lord's
y'all are keeping
work.
this world together.
Literally hanging by a thread, and the therapists are like, we just.
I hope that industry booms. I hope like Fortune 500 companies in a couple years are looking to invest in therapists because of how much booming has happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to thank our very special guest, Tracee Thomas. Thank you for sharing your story today. Thank you for all those beautiful gems. It was so beautiful to
I am very, very, very happy to be here. And if folks want to know or find me, I'm on the interwebs.
Tell us your info.
Yes, Instagram, always an Empress. So that's 1LALWAYS, always an Empress. And I'm going to be doing some more writings and sharing soon. So I also have an email list. So if you go to Empress Movements, which is the name of my company, empressmovements.com, and you can sign up for all the happenings in the world, my coaching, my speaking, all those good things.
Yes, definitely hit up Tracee, because I definitely got a coaching session for free today. I really needed it.
So I'm not even joking. If you need it, right.
Well, thank you. It was so nice to connect today and just talk. I think it's nourishing for the soul. So I hope it's nourishing to hear the stories as well. Yes. And if anybody has thoughts on who we should talk to next, please hit us up and we'll definitely have Tracee back. That's for sure. A big shout out to my producer, Copy, who makes this happen, because I don't do anything but talk. And I believe he's the first producer in his family. So that's pretty. And of course, I want to thank our listeners for your generosity of spirit, your valuable listening. We couldn't do it without you. My name is Cecy, and this has been First in the Family. Please tune in next week to see who was first. Peace, y'all.